In the early 1800s, the novel was a burgeoning form of media. Mary Shelley is often cited as being the mother of science fiction, with Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, which was published in 1818. The following year saw the publication of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. And if Scott didn't invent the genre of historical fiction, he certainly popularized it. Ivanhoe was a smash success and prominently features none other than Robin Hood. At that same time, another novelist, one who by coincidence was good friends with Mary Shelley's husband Percy, was also working on a novel that featured Robin Hood. However, while certainly featured, Robin Hood was not the primary protagonist in the novel. Instead, 200 years ago, in 1822, the book titled Maid Marian by Thomas Love Peacock was published. Here is how our heroine is described in Chapter 4. Matilda, for the first part of the book, she goes by the name Matilda, which is a nod to the Elizabethan-era plays of Anthony Munday, and she later adopts the name Marian after her outlawry. Matilda, not dreaming of visitors, tripped into the apartment in a dress of forest green, with a small quiver by her side, and a bow and arrow in her hand. Her hair, black and glossy as the raven's wing, curled like wandering clusters of dark ripe grapes under the edge of her round bonnet, and a plume of black feathers fell back negligently above it. With an almost horizontal inclination that seemed the habitual effect of rapid motion against the wind, her black eyes sparkled like sunbeams on a river, a clear, deep, liquid radiance, the reflection of ethereal fire, tempered, not subdued, in the medium of its living and gentle mirror. This is a witty and charming Marian, who inspires love and loyalty, while also being an active force to be reckoned with. She is a deft markswoman, and even duels Prince John at one point in the narrative. Matilda was only intent to get rid of her antagonist at any rate. The edge of her weapon painted his complexion with streaks of very unlover-like crimson, and she would probably have marred John's hand for ever signing Magna Carta, but that he was backed by the advantage of numbers, and that her sword broke short on the boss of his buckler. Now, exactly 100 years after the publication of Maid Marian, the character would be featured in one of Hollywood's first true blockbuster spectaculars, with 1922's Robin Hood, starring Douglas Fairbanks. And exactly 100 years after that, this year of 2022, just a few days after this podcast releases, in fact, we'll see the release of the film The Adventures of Maid Marian. Signature Entertainment was good enough to arrange an interview with Bill Thomas, the writer and director of the film, and Sophie Craig, who plays none other than Maid Marian. Based on the trailer, and from what I gathered during our conversation, Sophie and Bill are presenting a Maid Marian very in keeping with the one that emerged from the pen of Thomas Love Peacock 200 years ago. This is Into the Greenwood. I'm your host, Thaddeus Papke. I'm a museum professional and history and folklore enthusiast. And this is the podcast where we peek under the hood of the most famous outlaw who may have never been. From archers to archaeologists, we're interviewing a wide variety of experts to look at every facet of the legends of Robin Hood. And today, we're talking with two filmmakers about bringing to our screens an overdue adaptation that finally puts Maid Marian front and center. One quick note more before the interview. During the discussion, Bill and Sophie mentioned their fight choreographer as having HEMA training. For anyone listening who might not know, HEMA stands for Historical European Martial Arts. It collectively refers to various European fighting styles, often centered around swordsmanship, that have been recreated from texts going back as far as the late Middle Ages. Today, there is a flourishing association with participants all over the world that engage in local and international competitions. But for now, string your bow, draw your sword, and perhaps pop some popcorn as we enter the Greenwood with director Bill Thomas and actor Sophie Craig.
Thaddeus.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
I have Bill and Sophie for you. I'll leave you to it.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Yeah, nice to meet you too. I was hoping that we could simply start with the two of you introducing yourselves and stating what your role is in the creation of this film, The Adventures of Maid Marian.
Okay, after you.
Hi, I'm Sophie Craig, and I play Marian in The Adventures of Maid Marian.
And I'm Bill. I'm the director.
Okay, so to introduce myself, my name is Thaddeus, and about exactly a year ago, I started producing this podcast that was all about Robin Hood. And sort of the point of the podcast was to look a little bit beyond the story that everybody knows and interpret that in a few different ways, to look at the real history that was going on in the Middle Ages, to talk with historians, to talk with archaeologists, to learn a little bit more about actual medieval history, to learn about what life in a castle might be like, to learn about folk beliefs. I did one episode where I went hunting with somebody who does bow hunting, just to kind of get all sorts of different senses of all those kind of different elements, but also to look at representations of Robin Hood in pop culture through the years. We've got a series called Splitting Arrows, where we've been looking at every single Robin Hood movie over the past 100 years, and we're still only through the 50s because there's a lot of them out there. So it was really exciting to learn that there was this movie that's coming out next month, right?
It is, yeah.
So if you don't mind, I've got a whole bunch of questions that I'd like to ask that I was hoping the two of you could share some insight on. And I think the big obvious one to start with is, why are we putting Maid Marian front and center for this story?
Shall I go into that?
Sure.
Yeah, by all means, butt in if you want to, Sophie. The honest answer is that we had both been working on a little comedy horror feature that was supposed to happen. Well, when would that have been? That would have been sort of winter 2020.
Yeah, 2020, yeah.
That kind of got killed by yet another lockdown, and so we were kind of kicking our heels, kind of going, "What? We've got to do something. This is frustrating. What can we do?" And I had a kind of a structure for a Robin Hood film kicking around, and we both worked together sort of a couple of times. We'd just done a series together, a documentary series called American Monster. We got on really well there. That was really good fun. So we just said, let's do something together. And so we just kind of, it was more look at who we've got available, look at what we've got available. How about we convert this Robin Hood story into a Maid Marian led story.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So one of the things that, I don't know, feels interesting about this movie is a little bit how it just sort of hasn't been done before. When preparing for the film, have you ever, I don't know, come across anything that made you feel like this is a story that should already have been done, and kind of, do you have any sense about why it hasn't been done before now?
It seems like a relatively obvious leap, I think. She's a strong character in some of the older stories or legends or whatever. She quite hands-on. She does, she fights with the blokes and things as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's a fairly obvious leap to make, I think.
Yeah, it's all there in the, if you look into it, like she is, like Bill said, very active part of it. She was fighting, and it's just, it seems like a natural progression for her story to be told, and why not? Robin Hood's had his time. Let's let Marian tell her story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really leads into one of the next questions I wanted to ask is, which were the elements that pertains to traditional Maid Marian stories that you really wanted to emphasize? Well, for instance, the fighting that you just mentioned in her like initial ballad appearance, she defeats Robin Hood in a sword fight. So, and based on what one sees in the trailer, we see a very active Marian. We see her getting into a lot of scraps and scuffles there. So we take it that was an element of the character you really wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really like making action adventure films, and I really enjoy sword fighting, blowing things up, all of that sort of thing, really. And personally, specifically, I wanted to make an action adventure film. As I said, I already had a Robin Hood kind of a structure that I'd had kicking around for a few years and hadn't really done anything with. And then all of a sudden I'm going to be slimy now, Sophie. I had a fantastic actress available, and we had some time. So we just thought, well, let's turn it to Marian. I didn't really see any reason to make, when the lead had been Robin, it was going to be, an action adventure, and I didn't really see a reason to, just because it was now Marian instead of Robin, to change that format. Really, it's just as valid for Marian to be kicking ass as it is for Robin, really. So.
Yeah, you don't seem to mind that aspect at all about it there, Sophie, do you?
No, not at all. As an actress, it's an amazing opportunity to be able to play like a historical figure, a legendary figure, and to be able to give her a little bit of power. So yeah, for me, it was an incredible opportunity. I love working with Bill, to be able to lead up a film and to be able to be such a iconic character and be able to portray her in a way that maybe hasn't been seen before, or maybe, it hasn't had the opportunity to be seen in that way before, was really exciting for me. So as an actress, it was an incredible opportunity, and yeah, maybe it'll inspire like a whole other flurry of young Robin Hood and Marian fans, and hopefully in a way that helps put a woman at the forefront as well. And yeah, just because she's a woman doesn't mean she can't fight.
There's lots and lots of precedent of female action heroes now. It's kind of it's yes, we're doing something slightly different with Robin by making it Marian rather than Robin, but it's really not unusual these days at all to have a female lead. It kind of should be normal, really.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, as I was saying, it's one of the things that feels kind of remarkable about the movie is how sort of overdue it feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in relation to all of the action, I think in the trailer we see Marian fighting with a quarterstaff. We definitely see her fighting with a sword. She fires bow and arrow. So how many of these things did you already have some familiarity with? How intensive was the training? And do you have sort of a favorite?
Is this for me or for
Bill? For you, since you're the one we get to see doing all the fighting.
Favorite. I think my favorite would be bow and arrow, because it was the one I'd had more experience with. Just a bit of basic training was all I had done before with a bow and arrow. And yeah, I just enjoy it. It feels cool. But then to pick up a sword, flail it around and wield it in front of like lots of soldiers was amazing. I actually was given the sword a good few weeks before filming to sort of get to grips with it. It was my sword. That was the sword I would be using for the filming. And to feel the weight of it, it was heavy. Mm-hmm. And don't be under any illusions, I am a small woman. So it was good to be able to figure out how to use it and stuff. We had an amazing fight coordinator. His name was Robin, ironically, who helped choreograph the fight scenes. But yeah, it was really cool. I remember I broke quite a lot of props actually, because obviously for some of the scenes we had like obviously axes and spades and things like that, and I did break I think one of them each time. I got a bit too carried away. But yeah, no, it was really good. In answer to that, the training, yeah, it was kind of like I was sent a lot of videos and stuff because we filmed over lockdown. So a lot of the fight scenes were sent to me prior, and I had to learn them there and then. And then obviously when we were on set, got to sort of spend some time with Robin before the fight scenes and get to grips with them. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I was battered by the end of it, but I loved it.
That was one of the issues as well that we had, was because it was during COVID restrictions, we couldn't meet up for rehearsals.
Yeah.
So as Sophie said, Robin, the fight coordinator, just did a load of videos of himself in his backyard playing all the parts in the fights, and then sending them to the different cast members so they knew what their moves were.
That's so fascinating.
Learned them on their own and then had to try and put them together on set.
Yeah.
But he's an instructor in, have you come across HEMA?
Oh, yeah.
Which is local English martial arts. So he teaches that. So, that's where that came from.
That's actually really interesting, gratifying to hear that you had somebody who's a HEMA expert there that lends a extra degree of authenticity to the style of fighting being used there. And I guess dovetailing off of that, so that implies that we had a certain level of historical accuracy to the fighting styles being employed. Were there other aspects to the medieval period that you wanted to really try to hone in on in terms of being accurate?
Well, to a degree, I mean, we were kind of quite hampered by the budget. It's quite a small film, and also again with COVID, because we tried to try and keep our cast and our crew as small as we possibly could. So, there are things that perhaps we might have done differently if we had more facilities available to us. But we tried to, as you know, the legends kind of cover several hundred years. Mm-hmm. I just kind of tried to narrow it down to roughly 12th century. And so as much as possible, the costumes and the armor and, kind of the helmets and things are all plausible for the 12th century.
The armor, there was nothing to think about that. I was 3 stone of chainmail. It wasn't like the film, but like the film chainmail. It was full on chainmail. I was like, yeah. That was heavy.
I've had to do a bit of that before in my past. The actually like getting used to wearing and moving around in chainmail. That it's a little bit different.
Yep. Yeah. If we had the Lord of the Rings budget, then it would be kind of rubber rings and plastic rings and stuff. But steel.
We were hardcore. We went all in. So the exhaustion in the film on my face is completely real.
Yeah. You could just chalk it up to method acting, I suppose. I had one, just to get on a very slight tangent, one weird time in college. I was taking a medieval studies class, and I did a presentation where I did a sword fight demonstration wearing chainmail and with a broadsword. But then no more than 10 minutes after that presentation, I had an exam for an American history class on the other side of campus. So I had no time to change or anything. And trying to carry chainmail in a backpack is a lot heavier than trying to wear it. So I bicycled across campus still wearing the chainmail, arrived to my American history class still in the chainmail, sat down in my seat, started taking the test, and everybody's just looking at me like I'm just some kind of lunatic. And besides the breaking spades, did you have any other sort of funny outtake moments or kind of weird or funny occasions that you'd like to share?
I think Sophie spends a lot of the film running.
It became a bit of a running joke, actually, that especially the soundy, because we'd go away and do wild tracks of me just running and panting because there was that much running in the film. It did become a bit of a running joke. I don't know. It was such a lovely time on set. Everyone was so lovely, and like Bill said, it was a small cast and crew. So I think everyone was just mucking in and really grateful to be out and not locked up in our houses.
There was a couple of things we shot it on an airsoft site. So friends of ours own an airsoft site, but it was closed because of COVID. So they essentially had this large forest available to us. We could kind of do what we liked, but in part of it, they've got a small Western town, kind of like a Wild West kind of set where they run Western games.
Interesting.
And and we kind of had our production base in the Western Town because that's where most of the buildings were.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Western Town, leaning up, there was a coffin.
Yeah.
And so there were several people were freaked out by Sophie or other people leaping out of the coffin.
That was mainly down to myself and Dominic, who plays Robin. Yeah, they were hiding in the coffin a lot.
It was really good fun, and it's a really really fun set where we kind of laughed a lot. But I don't think we didn't really have.
No, not really.
Particularly, did we?
I don't think so. There was a lot of people tripping and falling because of the terrain. That's always funny, isn't it? Including myself. Actually, one of the first days of filming, I think it was the second day, we'd done a big fight scene in a camp, and Dominic, who plays Robin, had picked up a helmet and he cut himself. I'd been wearing the chainmail, and the chainmail got really heavy and stuff. And it was just, and everybody, like one of I can't remember, George had fallen over and sprained his ankle and stuff. Like, we were just all in the wars that particular day, whilst we were just figuring everything out. But yeah, it was just so good, wasn't it? I really enjoyed it. It would be great to work with everyone again. So yeah,
there was a day where we went to a different location.
Oh yes.
And we were supposed to be there for 3 days. It was like a small forest that just had some different terrain in it. There was kind of like a small lake and things that we were filming at. So we moved from the airsoft site, and we'd wrecked it a couple of times, but I think we must have wrecked it at the weekends, and everything seemed fine. And then when we got there, we had a motorway nearby with rush hour traffic going on it. There were donkeys. There were people.
Oh, those donkeys!
Yeah, aeroplanes, quad bikes, cows, like a dairy herd coming in to be fed. The noise was just incredible, wasn't it? We actually had to bail out. We were supposed to be there for 3 days, and we left after the first day.
Yeah, we had like a whole unit move in less than 24 hours, like two unit moves. Yeah,
unnecessarily exciting. But then the flip side, I don't know if you've seen it in the. Did it feature in the trailer, the Priory?
Yeah.
We spent a day right at the end of the shoot where we went down to Devon to kind of like this big kind of sort of rocky outcrop with a chapel on top of it, and it was just amazing, wasn't it? There was only like about 10 of us, went a tiny little reduced unit, and just kind of the weather was glorious, and yeah, it was. And Sophie spent the day running up and down a big rock.
I did, yeah, I did. My knees didn't like me by the end of that day. But that was beautiful. There was a really old church on the top. It was just fascinating, wasn't it? Like
just kind of being after us all having been sort of locked up for months with lockdown, just being kind of out in the middle of nowhere, glorious sunny day all day. We could kind of do what we liked. That was fantastic, wasn't it? Good way to finish the shoot.
Yeah, it was lovely.
I believe the trailer starts by showing this priory. It's got a few nuns. They're being talked to by somebody. I don't think it's very clear who. A little bit of mystery there. And it seems that Marian has been hanging out in this priory while Robin has been away at the Crusades. That seems to be the start of the story. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's right.
And then the film kind of picks up with Robin returning from the Crusades, and it sounds like King Richard might be dead at this point, so we're into the early reign of King John.
Yep. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the kind of the catalyst for it is that, as you say, Robin's away at the Crusades. Marian. So this is kind of after most of the traditional stories, really. So the idea is that they've been outlaws together in the forest. They've had altercation with the sheriff. Richard has returned, and then they've gone. He's then taken Robin back off to fight with him. And there's I'm sure you've already spotted, but a historical flaw there, which is that they didn't go back to the Crusades. Richard dies in France. But we won't talk about that because we realised our mistake far too late. But
it's all right. It's not Richard's story anyway. It's Marian's.
No, so,
it was after all that. This is based on after it all.
But because Robin's gone away to fight, Marian can't go with him, but she's still technically an outlaw, so she's taken sanctuary in the Priory, waiting for Robin to come back. Yeah, and sort of the news of Richard's death kind of causes her to leave the Priory, and the story starts there, really.
Interesting. I really like that angle. There's a few different takes out there on that. Robin and Marian, like the story that you might already know has already happened, but we're going to pick up later. And I like this take of Marian still being an outlaw and having to claim sanctuary. I'm excited to watch the film and find out more about how that all gets resolved.
That's another kind of one of our, history is probably the wrong word, but there's history of the legend, I guess. It's a little sort of time fudges there where I like the character of Prioress Elizabeth, but she's from, I think, sort of 14th century, I think, isn't she? But she was just a good character, so we kind of just brought her forward into our 12th century world.
What Prioress Elizabeth is this that you're talking about?
So there's a place called Kirklees Priory, which is up in York, and in some of the stories, there's the Prioress who. It's her that kills Robin in the end, so she bleeds him to death. So
do you have the sinister Prioress here in your story?
Absolutely nothing. But in reality, at Kirklees Priory, there is a gravestone there with for Prioress Elizabeth from the 14th century. So there's a real Prioress Elizabeth historically, who may or may not have been the lady that's related to the legends, but yeah, she just came across as a good character, so I just thought it'd be kind of fun to bring her forward.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how she gets integrated. In previous episodes of the podcast where we've talked about Maid Marian, where we've talked about other female characters, we've actually highlighted the Prioress as a character with a lot of really interesting potential who gets underutilized in most adaptations. So that is exciting that in addition to Maid Marian getting the spotlight, we're also bringing in that character of the Prioress and letting her get a little more focus there too.
I think the other thing kind of about it is about her is that lots and lots and lots of the films kind of end at the point when Richard comes back. And so you never get as far as Robin's death, and she only really usually sort of appears around about Robin's death, so usually it's kind of irrelevant to the films, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. So we've got the Prioress, we've got Robin and Marian, obviously, the two brothers, Richard and John. Sheriff of Nottingham is still the primary antagonist. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I'm not sure how much we're supposed to say or not, but yeah. Yes, he is. Yeah. Yeah, and there's a couple of other characters that crop up. We've got Friar Tuck appears briefly, and Little John's in it for some of it as well. There's a slightly obscure one, Abbot Eustace, who, again, I don't think he really crops up in the stories often, but he was the abbot of a monastery near Nottingham at the sort of in our period of history. So I've just kind of taken his character and dropped him in as well. Yeah.
Were there any other characters that you sort of initially wanted to have a bigger role, or characters from the legend that you wanted to bring in but just couldn't quite figure out how to make them fit within the story structure and or the budget?
Well, it was good. I mean, lots of it was down to COVID, really. So we deliberately had to try and keep it as small as possible so that, Will Scarlet would have been an obvious one to bring in. I don't know how familiar you are with Robin of Sherwood, which is a BBC, probably ITV series from the 1980s in the UK. And I loved that when I was a kid. And Will Scarlet's one of the major characters in that. So, yes, it would have been great to fit him in. He gets a name check in the dialogue, but he never actually appears, unfortunately.
Right.
We just have to keep our cast as tiny as we could.
That's for the second film.
That's right. I'm excited to hear about the even further adventures of Maid Marian. So a question for you then, Sophie, is what were kind of your main sources of inspiration for your interpretation of Maid Marian?
When I look at sort of like a script, I kind of try to not let anything influence me too much, because I want to be able to let the script do the talking, if that makes sense. And a good script will do that. You'll get what you need from the character within the script. But immediately as I was reading it, the first thing that popped into my head, and I used to watch it all the time when I was younger, was like Xena, Warrior Princess. And that was the first thing that popped into my head. watching her. I mean, and like both of you have correctly pointed out, like sort of previous portrayals of Marian in this light haven't really been done before. It's not been touched on. So I was excited to bring something new to it immediately. She's quite feisty in it, but I hope I managed to get across with that there was still that she is a female, she is a woman. So I still wanted to show like that she was feisty, but there is that fragility of a woman in her as well. Which, I wanted to make sure I was doing, and hopefully I did. But yeah, in terms of inspiration, I kind of like I got what I needed from the script. And then obviously just being a fan of this kind of genre anyway, I was very much sort of like, I looked at sort of powerful characters that women have portrayed in sort of action adventure films and just kind of, I hope I made her my own. Like it was a good opportunity to be able to bring her to life in a way that hasn't been done before. But yeah, and Bill was great with it as well. His way of sort of directing is very much like, no, I trust completely the actor's instincts, so let's go with that, and then we'll see what we're playing with. But yeah, I mean, basically, I guess Xena Warrior Princess. But I hope I've made her my own, and that she's feisty female, but also she's fragile as well. The fragility, I think, is also a power though to her as well.
Yeah,
I think with Xena as well, it's kind of worth saying, kind of tonally, we were kind of going for, it's a family film. You know, so it's supposed to be kind of accessible. It's meant to be a kind of a rip-roaring adventure. And I think Pirates of the Caribbean was definitely one of the touchstones for it. That kind of, it's probably not quite as light as that, but kind of, this is going to be a really strange comparison, but it's somewhere between Pirates of the Caribbean and Last of the Mohicans. So.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I do have the association with Last of the Mohicans of a lot of running around in the woods, so there's that.
Yep.
There is that. I did a lot of running.
You've mentioned sort of hoping that this film might be, a nice inspirational thing for children, families, people kind of getting introduced to these characters again, seeing heroic role models. Were either of you fans of the Robin Hood legends when you were growing up?
I absolutely was, yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 1,000,000%.
Yeah, a little bit of a nerd, I'm afraid, yes.
What's what were the like kind of early Robin Hood versions that you remember falling in love with when you were young?
God, I've probably got. Hang on 2 seconds. Hang on. This is really old. Which is this is from 1957, I think. This book. But
is it the Roger Lancelin Green? Mm-hmm.
So you clearly know your stuff, don't you? I've probably had this since I was about 8 or something, I would say. So yeah, that's probably where it started for me, I guess.
That's pretty great.
That's amazing, Phil.
Very nerdy, sorry.
And how about how about you?
I was introduced to it, not unfortunately by amazing books like that, but through television, through the British series. Weird, actually, one of my first, obviously, growing up, Disney did an adaptation of it with the foxes. That was like kind of my first, that was like my first kind of like, oh, Robin Hood. And obviously you're told the stories as a kid growing up and stuff, but that was like my first sort of like introduction to it. And that was what piqued my interest, and that was what made me aware of it. Obviously it's a cartoon, it's not quite as cool as everything else, but that was my first experience of it. And I think any sort of like 90s kid, that's like was their introduction to Robin Hood, and then that would lead you on to be able to sort of like delve into it more and be more and take more of an interest in like sort of all the legends and all the stories and I guess I grew up with it. With, like you said, there's been so many adaptations of it, and there was a lot as I was growing up. So yeah, it was always something I was watching. My granddad used to watch the whole series all the time. So it was always on when I was visiting him too. So
nice. That 1980s series. The Robin of Sherwood.
Yeah, Robin of Sherwood. That was the ITV, wasn't it? Yeah. That one. I mean, I was not born then. But he
all over the place.
I remember seeing like repeats of that on like public broadcast when I was growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the sort of person that had all like VCRs of everything, all the box sets and stuff. And he would also tape stuff on the telly. Remember when you could like record them onto VCR, and he'd have like a whole stack of things that he'd recorded off the TV.
And there was always 5 minutes at the end or the start, wasn't there?
Yeah, just right. After fast forward.
Yes. Oh, that takes me back. So I want to be very mindful of your time. Just a couple of other quick questions. One is there any sort of final takeaways that you want people to have regarding your film and the character of Maid Marian and how she's being portrayed? Like, what is it that you hope people will walk away from the film thinking about this legend and about this character?
I just hope people walk away with. I know there's a big fan base for Robin Hood, and for some people, Marian, for them, the idea of Marian being the hero might be a little bit strange. So I hope that for those people that they walk away and go, okay, yeah, that was actually pretty cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I hope they just enjoy it. It's such a good film to have been to watch. And for anybody that might be picking it up as somebody new and seeing like, oh, this is Marian. I want to know about Marian. I want to know what she did. I want them to be able to I just guess walk away and go, yeah, she was pretty badass. I just think that, as Bill said, there was no reason why it couldn't be Marian. Just because she's Marian, right? Like, why can't we tell her story? So, and I hope that's what people walk away with. I hope they leave, thinking that that it was a good film, that they enjoyed it, that they had a good time, and they could escape for 90 minutes. That's what I hope. So,
I think that's what we consciously were trying to make a fun family adventure. The kind of thing that certainly when I was a kid, that you'd sit down and watch on a Sunday afternoon together.
Yes,
it should be an adventure romp.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to watching it with my own kids. Speaking of that, the really final question that I really wanted to make sure we got in is, how can people watch the movie?
Well, we only kind of know the answer right now. So in theory, it's purely because the release date has changed a couple of times, but in theory at the moment, it's coming out in the UK on May the 9th. And the last we heard, because it's sold in several territories in the States as well. I can't tell you which ones yet because I don't know, but at least half of the states in theory should be available, and in theory their plan was to release them at the same time, so it should also be around about May the 9th. And in the UK, it's on Amazon, iTunes, Xbox, Sky, Ratuken, which I've heard of and never watched, so I'm not sure about that.
Really big, I think.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be a similar sort of set of platforms in the US.
Okay. And Virgin as well.
Virgin, yes, you said?
Right, yeah. And then we heard this morning as well, it's just been bought in Italy as well. So that's
great. Fun.
So probably right now somebody's dubbing Sophie's voice.
I can't wait to see that version.
Oh, that sounds excellent. I hope that it has incredible success. I look forward to getting this episode out there. Like I said, I look forward to watching the film and incorporating a full review of it into the podcast along with all of the other movies that we're doing.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. I promised I would end the interview by 5:30 your time, so I guess I will let you go. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
Great chat. Thank you. And very nice and timely as well. Thanks both. I'll be in touch with all of you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
My thanks again to Bill, Thomas, and Sophie Craig for joining me in the Greenwood. And thanks also for making a film that seems like an appropriate way to mark the centennial of the Douglas Fairbanks film and the bicentennial of the Thomas Love Peacock novel, even if that wasn't your specific intention. Certainly the notion of a rollicking, swashbuckling action film starring Maid Marian seems like exactly the sort of film we need to provide a little escapism and perhaps even a little inspiration right now. And I admit, as much as I love the figure of Robin Hood himself, I do find it exciting that we're getting more and more media in which the other figures, from what the scholar Maurice Keene called the matter of the greenwood, are getting some time in the spotlight. In addition to this film about Marian, I just discussed Friar Tuck getting to take center stage with Mike Nichols in the previous episode. And in the Forest Lord book series by Stephen A. McKay that was covered in episode 4 of the podcast, there's over half a dozen novellas and short stories in which Robin Hood doesn't even make an appearance. There's also graphic novels, such as The Cartoonish Adventures of Much the Miller's Son by Stephen Le Colliard, and a slew of works that even center around the Sheriff of Nottingham. If you'd like more insights on the character of Maid Marian, though, her literary history and previous adaptations of the character, then I suggest episode 8, To All the Marians I Have Known, with Emily J. Rich, which I will link to in the description for this episode, along with the trailer for the new film. By the time you hear this episode, it will be likely that The Adventures of Maid Marian will already be available for streaming. If you're at all interested in sharing your thoughts on the film, please get in touch via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, where we use the handle @IntoGreenwood. If you wouldn't touch social media with a cloth-yard shaft, you can also email us directly via intogreenwood@gmail.com. Into the Greenwood is produced and edited by me, Thaddeus Papke. Our theme music is by Plastic 3. And it's brought to you by the generous support of our patrons on patreon.com/intogreenwood. Into the Greenwood is completely ad-free, and we're hoping to keep it that way. To do that, though, we do rely on your support. Contributions for as little as $1 per episode on patreon.com/intogreenwood go a long way towards keeping us on the air. If you're not sure about wanting to commit to a recurring contribution, you can also simply leave us a tip on ko-fi.com/intogreenwood. That's ko-fi.com/intogreenwood. And because we value both charity and conservation, 10% of all proceeds go to the selected top-rated foundation of Trees, Water, and People that implements sustainable solutions for providing clean water and food to impoverished communities around the world. If you're not exactly at risk of being one of the rich that Robin might rob from, we certainly understand and even more happily encourage non-monetary contributions as well. Positive ratings and reviews that help us get noticed in Podfinder algorithms, and simple, good old-fashioned word of mouth goes a long way towards helping small, independent podcasts like this one. That's it for now. And so, once again, I find myself wishing safe travels to you, one and all, until our next journey together into the Greenwood.
The bowman is finished.
I'll tell the story of Robin Hood until the day you die.
You all right?
Never better.